A Description of New England by Captain John Smith. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Algie Pugg. A Description of New England by Captain John Smith. Section 0. Title page and dedications. A Description of New England, or the Observations and Discoveries of Captain John Smith, Admiral of that country in the north of America, in the year of our Lord 1614, with the success of 6 ships, that went the next year 1615, and the accidents befell him among the French men of war. With the proof of the present benefit this country affords, whither this present year 1616 8 voluntary ships are gone to make further trial. At London, printed by Humphrey Lowndes for Robert Clerk, and are to be sold at his house called the Lodge in Chancery Lane, over against Lincoln's Inn, 1616. To the high hopeful Charles, Prince of Great Britain, Sir, so favourable was your most renowned and memorable brother, Prince Henry, to all generous designs, that in my discovery of Virginia I presumed to call 2 nameless headlands after my sovereign heirs, Cape Henry and Cape Charles. Since then, it being my chance to range some other parts of America, whereof I here present your Highness the description in a map, my humble suit is, you would please to change their barbarous names for such English as posterity may say Prince Charles was their godfather. What here in this relation I promise my country, let me live or die the slave of scorn and infamy, if, having meanness, I make not apparent, please God to bless me but for such accidents as are beyond my power and reason to prevent. For my labours I desire but such conditions as were promised me out of the gains, and that your Highness would deign to grace this work by your princely and favourable respect unto it, and to know me to be your Highness' true and faithful servant, John Smith. To the right honourable and worthy Lords, Knights, and Gentlemen of his Majesty's Council for all plantations and discoveries, especially of New England. Seeing the deeds of the most just and the writings of the most wise, not only of men but of God himself, have been diversely traduced by variable judgments of the time's opinionists, what shall such ignorant as I expect? Yet reposing myself on your favours, I present this rude discourse, to the world's construction; though I am persuaded that few do think there may be had from New England stapled commodities well worth 300,000 or 400,000 a year, with so small a charge, and such facility as this discourse will acquaint you. But, lest your honours, that know me not, should think I go by hearsay or affection, I entreat your pardons to say this much of myself: near twice 9 years I have been taught by lamentable experience, as well in Europe and Asia as Afric and America, such honest adventures as the chance of war doth cast upon poor soldiers. So that, if I not be able to judge of what I have seen, contrived, and done, it is not the fault either of my eyes or of 4 quarters. And these 9 years I have bent my endeavours to find a sure foundation to begin these ensuing projects, which though I never so plainly and seriously propound, yet it resteth in God and you still to dispose of; not doubting but your goodness will pardon my rudeness, and ponder errors in the balance of good will. No more, but saving all my best abilities to the good of my prince and country, and submitting myself to the exquisite judgments of your renowned virtue, I ever rest your honours in all honest service, J.S. To the right worshipful adventurers for the country of New England, in the cities of London, Bristow, Exeter, Plymouth, Dartmouth, Bastable, Tutneys, etc., and in all other cities and ports in the kingdom of England. If the little ant and the silly bee seek by their diligence the good of their commonwealth, much more ought man. If they punish the drones and sting them stealeth their labour, then blame not man. Little honey hath that hive where there are more drones than bees, and miserable is that land where more are idle than well employed. If the endeavours of those vermin be acceptable, I hope mine may be excusable; though I confess it were more proper for me to be doing what I say than writing what I know. Had I returned rich, I could not have erred. Now having only such fish as came to my net, I must be taxed; but I would my taxes were as ready to adventure their purses, as I purse, life, and all I have, or as diligent to furnish the charge, as I know they are vigilant to crop the fruits of my labours. Then would I not doubt, did God please, I might safely arrive in New England, and safely return, but to perform somewhat more than I have promised, and to prove my words by deeds, according to proportion. I am not the first hath been betrayed by pirates; and four men of war, provided as they were, had been sufficient to have taken Samson, Hercules, and Alexander the Great, no other way furnished than I was. I know not what assurance any have to pass the seas, not to be subject to casualty as well as myself; but lest this disaster may hinder my proceedings, or ill will, by rumour, the hopeful work I pretend. I have writ this little, which I did think to have concealed from any public use, until I had made my return speak as much as my pen now doth. But because I speak so much of fishing, if any take me for such a devout fisher as I dream of nought else, they mistake me. I know a ring of gold from a grain of barley, as well as a goldsmith; and nothing is there to be had which fishing doth hinder, but further us to obtain. Now for that I have made known unto you a fit place for plantation, limited within the bounds of your patent and commission; having also received means, power, and authority by your directions, to plant there a colony, and make further search and discovery in those parts there as yet unknown; considering withal first those of his Majesty's council, then those cities above named, and divers others that have been moved to lend their assistance to so great a work, doth expect, especially the adventurers, the true relation or event of my proceedings which I hear are so abused. I am enforced for all these respects rather to expose my imbecility to contempt by the testimony of these rude lines, than all should condemn me for so bad a factor, as could neither give reason nor account of my actions and designs. Yours to command, John Smith. End of Section 0. Title page and dedications. A Description of New England by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 1. Testimonial Verses, Opening Set. In the deserved honour of the author, Captain John Smith, and his work. Damned envy is a sprite that e'er haunts beasts, misnamed men, cowards or ignorants; but only such she follows, whose dear worth, maugre her malice, sets their glory forth. If this fair overture, then, take note, it is envy's spite, dear friend, in men of wit; or fear, lest morsels which our mouths possess might fall from thence, or else 'tis sottishness. If either, I hope neither, thee they raise, thy letters are as letters in thy praise, who by their vice improve when they reprove thy virtue, so in hate procure thee love. Then on firm worth this monument I frame, scorning for any smith to forge such fame. Joe Davies, Hereford. To his worthy Captain, the Author. That which we call the subject of all story is truth, which in this work of thine gives glory to all that thou hast done. Then scorn the spite of envy, which doth no man's merits right. My sword may help the rest, my pen no more can do but this, I have said enough before. Your sometime soldier, I Codrington, now Templar. To my worthy friend and cousin, Captain John Smith. It overjoys my heart, when as thy words of these designers with deeds I do compare. Here is a book, such worthy truth affords, none should the due desert thereof impair. Sith thou, the man, deserving of these ages, much pain hast ta'en for this our kingdom's good. In climes unknown, mongst Turks and salvages, t'enlarge our bounds, though with thy loss of blood. Hence, damned attraction, stand not in our way, and we, itself, will not the truth gainsay. N. Smith. To that worthy and generous gentleman, my very good friend, Captain Smith. May fate thy project prosper, that thy name may be eternized with living fame, though foul detraction honour would pervert, and envy ever waits upon desert. In spite of Peleus, when his hate lays cold, return as Jason with a fleece of gold. Then after ages shall record thy praise, that a New England to this isle didst raise. And when thou diest, as all that live must die, thy fame live here, thou with eternity. R. Gunnel. To his friend Captain Smith, upon his description of New England. Sir, your relations I have read, which show there's reason I should honour them and you, and if their meaning I have understood, I dare to censure thus: your project's good, and may, if followed, doubtless quit the pain with honour, pleasure, and a treble gain, beside the benefit that shall arise to make more happy our posterities. For would we deign to spare, though 'twere no more than what o'erfills and surfeits us in store, to order nature's fruitfulness awhile in that rude garden you New England style. With present good there's hope in after days thence to repair what time and pride decays in this rich kingdom; and the spacious West being still more with English blood possessed, the proud Iberians shall not rule those seas to check our ships from sailing where they please, nor future times make any foreign power become so great to force a bound to our. Much good my mind foretells would follow hence with little labour and with less expense. Thrive therefore thy design, who e'er envy. England may joy in England's colony, Virginia seek her virgin sister's good, be blessed in such happy neighbourhood. Oh, whatsoe'er fate pleaseth to permit, be thou still honoured for first moving it. George Wither, Associated Lincoln. In the desert honour of my honest and worthy Captain, John Smith, and his work. Captain and friends, when I peruse thy book, with judgment's eyes into thy heart I look, and there I find, what sometimes Albion knew, a soldier to his country's honour true. Some fight for wealth, and some for empty praise, but thou alone thy country's fame to raise. With due discretion and undaunted heart, I oft so well have seen thee act thy part, In deepest plunge of hard extremity, As forced the troops of proudest foes to flee. Though men of greater rank and less desert Would pish away thy praise, it cannot start From the true owner; for, all good men's tongue Shall keep the same, to them that part belongs. If, then, wit, courage, and success should get thee fame, The muse for that is in thy debt. A part whereof, least able though I be, Thus here I do disperse, to honour thee. Raleigh Crusher. Michael Fetty Place, William Fetty Place, and Richard Whiffing, gentlemen and soldiers under Captain Smith's command, in his deserved honour for his work and worth. Why may not we in this work have our might, that had our share in each black day and night, when thou Virginia foil'dst, yet keptst unstained, and held'st the King of Paspahegh enchained? Thou all alone the salvage stern did take. Paumunkus king we saw thee captive make, Among 700 of his stoutest men, To murther thee and us resolved, When fast by the hand thou ledst this salvage grim, Thy pistol at his breast to govern him, Which did infuse such awe in all the rest, Sith their dread sovereign thou hast so distressed, That thou and we, poor 16, safe retired, Unto our helpless ships. Thou, thus admired, did make proud Powhatan His subjects send to James this town, Thy censure to attend; And all Virginia's lords and petty kings, Awed by thy virtue, crouch and presents brings, To gain thy grace: so dreaded thou hast been. And yet a heart more mild is seldom seen, So making valour virtue rarely, Who has nought in thee counterfeit or sly. If in the sleight be not the truest art, That makes men foremost for fair desert, Who saith of thee, this savours of vainglory, Mistakes both thee and us, and this true story? If it be ill in thee so well to do, Then is it ill in us to praise thee too. But, if the first be well done, it is well To say it doth, if so it doth, excel. Praise is a guerdon of such dear desert, Making the praised act the praised part With more alacrity. Honour's spur is praise, Without which it, regardless, soon decays. And for this pains of thine we praise thee rather, That future times may know who was the father Of this rare work, New England, which may bring Praise to thy God, and profit to thy King. End of Section 1. Testimonial Verses, opening set. Section 2 of A Description of New England, by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in a public domain. Recording by Algie Pug. Section 2. A Description of New England, Part 1. A Description of New England by Captain John Smith. My first voyages to New England. In the month of April 1614, with 2 ships from London, of a few merchants, I happened to arrive in New England, a part of America, at the Isle of Monebiggan, in the 43½ of northerly latitude. Our plot was there to take whales, and to make trials of a mine of gold and copper. If those failed, fish and furs was then our refuge, to make ourselves savers howsoever. We found this whale fishing a costly conclusion. We saw many, and spent much time in chasing them, but could not kill any, they being a kind of jubartes, and not the whale that yield us finesse and oil as we expected. For our gold, it was rather the master's device to get a voyage that projected it, than any knowledge he had at all of any such matter. Fish and furs was now our guard. And, by our late arrival, and long lingering about the whale, The prime of both those seasons were past ere we perceived it, we thinking that their seasons served at other times, but we found it otherwise, for by the midst of June the fishing failed. Yet in July and August some was taken, but not sufficient to defray so great a charge as our stay required. Of dry fish we made about 40,000, of core fish about 7,000. Whilst the sailors fished, myself with 8 or 9 others of them might best be spared. Ranging a coast in a small boat, we got for trifles near 1100 beaver skinnets, 100 martens, and near as many otters, and the most of them within a distance of 20 leagues. Revenged the coast both east and west much further. But eastwards our commodities were not esteemed, they were so near the French who affords them better, and right against us in the main was a ship of Sir Francis Pophamus, that had there such acquaintance, having many years used only that port, that the most part there was had by him. On the 40 leagues westward were 2 French ships, that had made there a great voyage by trade, during the time we tried those conclusions, not knowing the coast or Salvage's habitation. With these furs, the train, and the core fish, we returned for England in the bark, where within 6 months after our departure from the Downs we safe arrived back. The best of this fish was sold for £5 the hundredth, the rest by ill usage betwixt £3 and 50 shillings. The other ship stayed to fit herself for Spain with the dry fish that was sold, by the sailors' report that returned, at 40 rials the quintal, each hundred weighing 2 quintals and a half. The situation of New England. New England is that part of America in the ocean sea opposite to Nova Albion in the South Sea, discovered by the most memorable Sir Francis Drake in his voyage about the world, in regard whereto this is styled New England, being in the same latitude. New France off it is northward, southwards is Virginia, and all the adjoining continent with New Granada, New Spain, New Andalusia, and the West Indies. Know, because I have been so oft asked such strange questions of the goodness and greatness of those spacious tracts of land, how they can be thus long unknown, or nor possessed by the Spaniard, and many such like demands, I entreat your pardons if I chance to be too plain, or tedious in relating my knowledge for plain men's satisfaction. Notes of Florida. Florida is the next adjoining to the Indies, which unprosperously was attempted to be planted by the French, a country far bigger than England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, yet little known to any Christian but by the wonderful endeavours of Ferdinand de Soto, a valiant Spaniard, whose writings in this age is the best guide known to search those parts. Notes of Virginia. Virginia is no isle, as many do imagine, but part of the continent adjoining to Florida, whose bounds may be stretched to the magnitude thereof without offence to any Christian inhabitant. For from the degrees of 30 to 45 his Majesty hath granted his letters patents, the coast extending south west and north east about 1500 miles, but to follow it aboard, the shore may well be 2000 at the least, of which 20 miles is the most gives entrance into the Bay of Chesapeake, where is the London plantation, within which is a country, as you may perceive by the description in a book and map printed in my name of that little I there discovered, may well suffice 300,000 people to inhabit. And southward adjoineth that part discovered at the charge of Sir Walter Raleigh, by Sir Ralph Lane, and that learned mathematician Mr. Thomas Heriot. Northward 6 or 7 degrees is the river Sagadaboc, where was planted the western colony, by that honourable patron of virtue, Sir John Popham, Lord Chief Justice of England. There is also a relation printed by Captain Bartholomew Gosnold of Elizabeth's Isles, and an other by Captain Weymouth of the Pemaquid. From all these diligent observers, posterity may be bettered by the fruits of their labours. But for divers others, that long before and since have ranged those parts, within a kenning sometimes of the shore, some touching in one place, some in another, I must entreat them pardon for omitting them. For if I offend in saying that their true descriptions are concealed, or never well observed, or died with the authors, so that the coast is yet still but even as a coast unknown and undiscovered. I have had 6 or 7 several plots of those northern parts, so unlike each to other, and most so differing from any true proportion or resemblance of the country, as they did me no more good than was so much waste paper, though they cost me more. It may be it was not my chance to see the best, but lest others may be deceived as I was, or through dangerous ignorance hazard themselves as I did. I have drawn a map from point to point, isle to isle, and harbour to harbour, with the soundings, suns, rocks, and landmarks as I passed close aboard the shore in a little boat. Although there be many things to be observed, which the haste of other affairs did cause me omit. For, being sent more to get present commodities than knowledge by discoveries for any future good, I had not power to search as I would. Yet it will serve to direct any shall go that ways to safe harbours and the salvages' habitations. What merchandise and commodities for their labour they may find, this following discourse shall plainly demonstrate. Thus you may see, of this 2000 miles more than half is yet unknown to any purpose. No, not so much as the borders of the sea are yet certainly discovered. As for the goodness and true substance of the land, we are for the most part yet altogether ignorant of them, unless it be those parts about the Bay of Chesapeake and Sagadaboc. But only here and there we touched, or have seen a little those edges of those large dominions, which do stretch themselves into the main, God doth know how many 1000 miles, whereof we can yet no more judge than a stranger that saileth betwixt England and France can describe the harbours and dangers by landing here and there in some river or bay, till thereby the goodness and substances of Spain, Italy, Germany, Bohemia, Hungary, and the rest. By this you may perceive how much they err that think every one which hath been at Virginia understandeth or knows what Virginia is, or that the Spaniards know 1/2 of those territories they possess. No, not so much as the true circumference of the terra incognita, whose large dominions may equalize the greatness and goodness of America, for anything yet known. It is strange with what small power he hath reigned in the East Indies, and few will understand the truth of his strength in America, where he, having so much to keep with such a pampered force, they need not greatly fear his fury in the Bermudas, Virginia, New France, or New England, beyond whose bounds America doth stretch many 1000 miles, in the frozen parts whereof one Master Hudson, an English mariner, did make the greatest discoveries of any Christian I know of, where he unfortunately died. For Africa had not the industrious Portugalis ranged her unknown parts, who would have sought for wealth among those fried regions of black brutish niggers, where, notwithstanding all the wealth and admirable adventures and endeavours more than 140 years, they know not 1/3 of those black habitations. But it is not a work for every one to manage such an affair as makes a discovery, and plants a colony. It requires all the best parts of art, judgment, courage, honesty, constancy, diligence, and industry, to do but near well. Some are more proper for one thing than another. and therein are to be employed, and nothing breeds more confusion than misplacing and misemploying men in their undertakings. Columbus, Cortes, Pizarro, Soto, Magellanus, and the rest served more than apprenticeship to learn how to begin their most memorable attempts in the West Indies, which to the wonder of all ages successfully they effected, when many hundreds of others far above them in the world's opinion, being instructed but by relation, came to shame and confusion in actions of small moment, who doubtless in other matters were both wise, discreet, generous, and courageous. I say not this to detract anything from their incomparable merits, but to answer those questionless questions that keep us back from imitating the worthiness of their brave spirits that advanced themselves from poor soldiers to great captains, their posterity to great lords, their king to be one of the greatest potentates on earth, and the fruits of their labours his greatest glory, power, and renown. The description of New England. That part we call New England is betwixt the degrees of 41 and 45. But that part this discourse speaketh of stretcheth but from Penobscot to Cape Cod, some 75 leagues by a right line distant each from other, within which bounds I have seen at least 40 several habitations upon the sea coast, and sounded about 25 excellent good harbours, in many whereof there is anchorage for 500 sail of ships of any burthen, in some of them for 5000, and more than 200 isles overgrown with good timber of divers sorts of wood, which do make so many harbours as requireth a longer time than I had to be well discovered. The particular countries or governments. The principal habitation northward we were at was Penobscot. Southward along the coast and up the rivers we found Megadakut, Segokit, Pemaquid, Nusconkus, Kennebec, Sagadahoc, and Aumocogen. And to those countries belong the people of Segatago, Paghuntanuk, Pocopassum, Taukanakidnect, Wabiganus, Nasak, Mashirosquek, Warigwek, Mosoquen, Wakogo, Pasaranak, etc. To these are allied the countries of Ocosisco, Acominticus, Pasataquac, Agawon, and Namekek. All these, I could perceive, differ little in language, fashion, or government. Though most be lords of themselves, yet they hold the Bashabis of Penobscot the chief and greatest amongst them. The next I can remember by name are Matahunts, 2 pleasant isles of groves, gardens, and cornfields in league from the sea from the main. Then Totunt, Massachusetts, Pocapomet, Quonahasset, Sagoquas, Nahapasumkek, Topint, Sekasor, Totit, Nasnocomacac, Accomac, Chowum. Then Cape Cod, by which is Pomet and the Isle Norset of the language and alliance of them of Chowum. The others are called Massachusetts, of another language, humour, and condition. For their trade and merchandise, to each of their habitations they have divers towns and people belonging, and by their relations and descriptions more than 20 several habitations and rivers that stretch themselves far up into the country, even to the borders of divers great lakes, where they kill and take most of their beavers and otters. From Penobscot to Sagadahoc this coast is all mountains and isles of huge rocks, but overgrown with all sorts of excellent good woods for building houses, boats, barks, or ships, with an incredible abundance of most sorts of fish, much fowl, and sundry sorts of good fruits for man's use. The mixture of an excellent soil. Betwixt Sagadahoc and Sowakatuk there is but 2 or 3 sandy bays, but betwixt that and Cape Cod very many, Especially the coast of the Massachusetts is so indifferently mixed with high clay or sandy cliffs in one place, and then tracts of large long ledges of divers sorts, and quarries of stones in other places so strangely divided, with tinctured veins of divers colours, as free stone for building, slate for tiling, smooth stone to make furnaces and forges for glass or iron, and iron ore sufficient conveniently to melt in them. But the most part so resembleth the coast of Devonshire, I think most of the cliffs would make such limestone. If they be not of these qualities, they are so like, they may deceive a better judgment than mine. All which are so near rejoining those other advantages I observed in those parts, that if the ore prove as good iron and steel in those parts, as I know it is within the bounds of the country, I dare engage my heed, having but men skilful to work the simplers there growing, to have all things belonging to the building and the rigging of ships of any proportion, and good merchandise for the fraught, within a square of 10 or 14 leagues; and were it for a good reward, I would not fear to prove it in a less limitation. A proof of an excellent temper. A proof of health. And surely, by reason of those sandy cliffs and cliffs of rocks, both which we saw are so planted with gardens and corn fields, and so well inhabited with a goodly, strong, and well proportioned people, besides the greatness of the timber growing on them, the greatness of the fish, and the moderate temper of the air, for of 25 not any was sick, but 2 that were many years diseased before they went, notwithstanding our bad lodging and accidental diet, who can but approve this a most excellent place, both for health and fertility? And of all the 4 parts of the world that I have yet seen not inhabited, could I have but means to transport a colony, I would rather live here than anywhere, and if it did not maintain itself, were we but indifferently well fitted, let us starve. Steepled commodities present. The main steeple, from hence to be extracted for the present to produce the rest, is fish; which, however it may seem a mean and base commodity, yet who will but truly take the pains and consider the sequel, I think will allow it well worth the labour. It is strange to see what great adventures the hopes of setting forth men of war to rob the industrious innocent would procure, or such massy promises engross, though more are choked than well fed with such hasty hopes. The Hollanders fishing. But who doth not know that the poor Hollanders, chiefly by fishing, at a great charge and labour in all weathers in the open sea, are made a people so hardy and industrious; and by the venting this poor commodity to the Easterlings for as mean, which is wood, flax, pitch, tar, rosin, cordage, and such like, for which they exchange again to the French, Spaniards, Portugales, and English, etc., for what they want, are made so mighty, strong, and rich, as no state but Venice, of twice their magnitude, is so well furnished with so many fair cities, goodly towns, strong fortresses, and that abundance of shipping, and all sorts of merchandise, as well of gold, silver, pearls, diamonds, precious stones, silks, velvets, and cloth of gold; as fish, pitch, wood, or such gross commodities. What voyages and discoveries, east and west, north and south, yea, about the world make they! What an army by sea and land have they long maintained in despite of one of the greatest princes of the world! And never could the Spaniard with all his mines of gold and silver pay his debts, his friends, and army, half so truly as the Hollanders still have done by this contemptible trade of fish. Divers, I know, may allege many other assistances, but this is their mine, and the sea the source of those silvered streams of all their virtue, which hath made them now the very miracle of industry, the pattern of perfection for these affairs. And the benefit of fishing is that primum mobile which turns all their spheres to this height of plenty, strength, honour, and admiration. Which is £1,500. Herring, cod, and ling is that triplicity which makes their wealth and shipping's multiplicities, such as it is, and from which, few would think it, they yearly draw at least £500,000 of pounds sterling. Yet it is most certain, if records be true, and in this faculty they are so naturalized, and of their events so certainly acquainted, as there is no likelihood they will ever be paralleled, having 2,000 or 3,000 busses, flat bottoms, sod pinks, toads, and such like, that breeds them sailors, mariners, soldiers, and merchants, never to be wrought out of that trade, and fit for any other. I will not deny but others may gain as well as they, that will use it, though not so certainly, nor so much in quantity, for want of experience. And this herring they take upon the coast of Scotland and England, their cod and ling upon the coast of Ireland and in the North Seas. Hamborough and the East countries, for sturgeon and caviare, gets many thousands of pounds from England, and the Straits, Portugal, the Biscaynes, and the Spaniards make 40 or 50 sail yearly to Cape Blanc to hook for porgoes, mullet, and make potado; and Newfoundland doth yearly float near 800 sail of ships with a silly lean skinny poor John, and corfish, which at least yearly amounts to 300,000 or 400,000 pound. If from all those parts such pains is taken for this poor gains of fish, and by them hath neither meat, drink, nor clothes, wood, iron, nor steel, pitch, tar, nets, leads, salt, hooks, nor lines, for shipping, fishing, nor provision, but at the second, third, fourth, or fifth hand, drawn from so many several parts of the world ere they come together to be used in this voyage; if these, I say, can gain, and the sailors live, going for shares, less than the third part of their labours, yet spend as much time in going and coming as in staying there, so short is the season of fishing, why should not we more doubt than Holland, Portugal, Spaniard, French, or other, but to do much better than they, when there is victual to feed us, wood of all sorts, to build boats, ships, or barks, the fish at our doors, pitch, tar, masts, yards, and most of the other necessaries only for making; and here are no hard landlords to rack us with high rents, or extorted fines to consume us, no tedious pleas in law to consume us with their many years' disputations for justice, no multitudes to occasion such impediments to good orders as in populous states. So freely hath God and his Majesty bestowed those blessings on them that will attempt to obtain them, as here every man may be master and owner of his own labour and land, or the greatest part in a small time. If he have nothing but his hands, he may set up this trade, and by industry quickly grow rich, spending but half that time well, which in England we abuse in idleness, worse or as ill. Here is ground almost as good as any lieth in the height of 41, 42, 43, etc., which is as temperate and as fruitful as any other parallel in the world. Examples of the altitude comparatively. As for example, on this side the line west of it in the South Sea is Nova Albion, discovered, as is said, by Sir Francis Drake. East from it is the most temperate part of Portugal, the ancient kingdoms of Galicia, Biscay, Navarre, Aragon, Catalonia, Castilla the old, and the most moderatest of Castilla the new, and Valencia, which is the greatest part of Spain. which if the Spanish histories be true, in the Romans' time abounded no less with gold and silver mines than now the West Indies, the Romans then using the Spaniards to work in those mines, as now the Spaniards doth the Indians. Section 2. A description of New England by Captain John Smith, Part 1. Section 3. Of a description of New England by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 3. A description of New England, Part 2. And France, the provinces of Gascony, Languedoc, Avignon, Provence, Dauphine, Piedmont, and Touraine are in the same parallel, which are the best and richest parts of France. In Italy, the provinces of Genoa, Lombardy, and Verona, with a great part of the most famous state of Venice, the dukedoms of Bononia, Mantua, Ferrara, Ravenna, Bologna, Florence, Pisa, Siena, Urbine, Ancona, and the ancient city and country of Rome, with a great part of the great kingdom of Naples. In Slavonia, Istria, and Dalmatia, with the kingdoms of Albania. In Graecia, that famous kingdom of Macedonia, Bulgaria, Thessalia, Thracia, or Romania, where is seated the most pleasant and plentiful city in Europe, Constantinople. In Asia also, in the same latitude, are the temperatest parts of Natolia, Armenia, Persia, and China, besides divers other large countries and kingdoms in these most mild and temperate regions of Asia. Southward, in the same height, is the richest of gold mines, Chili and Baldivia, on the mouth of the great river of Plate, etc. For all the rest of the world in that height is yet unknown. Besides these reasons, mine own eyes, that have seen a great part of those cities and their kingdoms, as well as it, can find no advantage they have in nature but this: they are beautified by the long labour and diligence of industrious people and art. This is only as God made it when he created the world. Therefore I conclude, if the heart and entrails of those regions were sought, if their land were cultured, planted, and manured by men of industry, judgment, and experience, what hope is there, or what need they doubt, having these advantages of the sea, but it might equalize any of those famous kingdoms in all commodities, pleasures, and conditions? Seeing even the very edges do naturally afford us such plenty as no ship need return away empty, and only use but the season of the sea, fish will return an honest gain, beside all other advantages, her treasures having yet never been opened, nor her originals wasted, consumed, nor abused. The particular staple commodities that may be had. And whereas it is said, the Hollanders served the Easterlings themselves, and other parts that want, with herring, ling, and wet cod, the Easterlings, a great part of Europe, with sturgeon and caviare, Cape Blanc, Spain, Portugale, and the Levant, with mullet, and Putargo, Newfoundland, all Europe, with a thin poor John, yet all is so overlaid with fishers, as the fishing decayeth, and many are constrained to return with a small fruit. Norway and Polonia, pitch, tar, masts, and yards. Switzerland and Russia, iron and ropes. France and Spain, canoes, wine, steel, iron, and oil. Italy and Greece, silks and fruits, I dare boldly say, because I have seen naturally growing or breeding in those parts the same materials that all those are made of, they may as well be had here, or the most part of them, within the distance of 70 leagues for some few ages, as from all those parts, using but the same means to have them that they do, and with all those advantages. The nature of ground approved. First, the ground is so fertile, that questionless it is capable of producing any grain, fruits, or seeds you will sow or plant, growing in the regions afore named; but it may be, not every kind to that perfection of delicacy, or some tender plants may miscarry, because the summer is not so hot, and the winter more cold in those parts we have yet tried near the sea side, than we find in the same height in Europe or Asia. Yet I made a garden upon the top of a rocky isle in 43½ 4 leagues from the main, in May, that grew so well, as it served us for sallets in June and July. All sorts of cattle may here be bred and fed in the isles or peninsulae securely for nothing. In the interim, till they increase, if need be, observing the seasons, I durst undertake to have corn enough from the salvages for 300 men, for a few trifles; and if they should be untoward, as it is most certain they are, 30 or 40 good men will be sufficient to bring them all into subjection, and make this provision, if they understand what they do, 200 whereof may 9 months in the year be employed in making marchanable fish, till the rest provide other necessaries, fit to furnish us with other commodities. The seasons for fishing approved. In March, April, May, and half June, here is cod in abundance; in May, June, July, and August, mullet and sturgeon, whose roes do make caviare and putargo; herring, if any desire them; I have taken many out of the bellies of cods, some in nets; but the salvages compare their store in the sea to the hairs of their heads. And surely there are an incredible abundance upon this coast. In the end of August, September, October, and November, you have cod again, to make core fish, or purgeon; and each 100 is as good as 200 or 300 in the Newfoundland; so that half the labour in hooking, splitting, and turning is saved, and you may have your fish, at what market you will, before they can have any in Newfoundland, where their fishing is chiefly but in June and July, whereas it is here in March, April, May, September, October, and November, as is said; so that by reason of this plantation the merchants may have fraught both out and home, which yields an advantage worth consideration. Your core fish you may in like manner transport as you see cause, to serve the ports in Portugale, as Lisbon, Aura, Port, and divers others, or what market you please, before your islanders return; they being tied to the season in the open sea, you having a double season, and fishing before your doors, may every night sleep quietly ashore, with good cheer and what fires you will, or when you please with your wives and family; they only their ships in the main ocean. The mullets here are in that abundance, you may take them with nets, sometimes by hundreds, where at Cape Blanc they hook them; yet those but 1½ foot in length, these 2, 3, or 4, as oft I have measured. Much salmon some have found up the rivers, as they have passed. Here the air is so temperate, as all these at any time may well be preserved. Employment for poor people and fatherless children. Now young boys and girlish salvages, or any other, be they never such idlers, may turn, carry, and return fish, without either shame nor any great pain. He is very idle that is past 12 years of age and cannot do so much, and she is very old that cannot spin a thread to make engines to catch them. The facility of the plantation. For their transportation, the ships that go there to fish may transport the first, who for their passage will spare the charge of double manning their ships, which they must do in the Newfoundland, to get their fraught. But 1/3 part of that company are only but proper to serve a stage, carry a barrow, and turn poor John. Notwithstanding, they must have meat, drink, clothes, and passage, as well as the rest. Now all I desire is but this, that those that voluntarily will send their shipping should make here the best choice they can, or accept such as are presented them, to serve them at that rate, and their ships returning leave such with me, with the value of that they should receive coming home, in such provisions and necessary tools, arms, bedding, and apparel, salt, hooks, nets, lines, and such like as they spare of the remainings; who till the next return may keep their boats, and do them many other profitable offices, provided I have men of ability to teach them their functions, and a company fit for soldiers to be ready upon such an occasion, because of the abuses which have been offered the poor salvages, and the liberty both French, or any that will, hath to deal with them as they please; whose disorders will be hard to reform, and the longer the worse. Now such order with facility might be taken, with every port town or city, to observe but this order, with free power to convert the benefits of their fraughts to what advantage they please, and increase their numbers as they see occasion; who ever as they are able to subsist of themselves, may begin the new towns in New England in memory of their old; which freedom being confined but to the necessity of the general good, the event, with God's help, might produce an honest, noble, and a profitable emulation. Present commodities. Salt upon salt may assuredly be made, if not at the first in ponds, yet till they be provided this may be used. Then the ships may transport kine, horse, goats, coarse cloth, and such commodities as we want, by whose arrival may be made that provision of fish to fraught the ships that they stay not. And then if the sailors go for wages, it matters not. It is hard if this return defray not the charge, but care must be had they arrive in the spring, or else provision be made for them against the winter. Of certain red berries called alkermes, which is worth 10 shillings a pound, but of these hath been sold for 30 or 40 shillings the pound, may yearly be gathered a good quantity. Of the muskrat may be well raised gains, well worth their labour, that will endeavour to make trial of their goodness. Of beavers, otters, martens, black foxes, and furs of price, may yearly be had 6 or 7,000, and if the trade of the French were prevented, many more. 25,000 this year were brought from those northern parts into France, of which trade we may have as good part as the French, if we take good courses. Of mines of gold and silver, copper, and probabilities of lead, crystal, and alum, I could say much if relations were good assurances. It is true indeed, I have made many trials according to those instructions I had, which do persuade me I need not despair, but there are metals in the country. But I am no alchemist, nor will promise more than I know, which is, who will undertake the rectifying of an iron forge, if those that buy meat, drink, coals, ore, and all necessaries at a dear rate gain? Where all these things are to be had for the taking up, in my opinion cannot lose. Of woods, seeing there is plenty of all sorts, if those that build ships and boats buy wood at so great a price, as it is in England, Spain, France, Italy, and Holland, and all other provisions for the nourishing of man's life, live well by their trade, when labour is all required to take those necessaries without any other tax, what hazard will be here but do much better? And what commodity in Europe doth more decay than wood? For the goodness of the ground, let us take it fertile, or barren, or as it is, seeing it is certain it bears fruits, to nourish and feed man and beast, as well as England, and the sea those several sorts of fish I have related. Thus seeing all good provisions for man's sustenance may with this facility be had, by a little extraordinary labour, till that transported be increased, and all necessaries for shipping only for labour, to which may be added the assistance of the salvages, which may easily be had if they be discreetly handled in their kinds, towards fishing, planting, and destroying woods. What gains might be raised if this were followed, when there is but once men to fill your storehouses, dwelling there, you may serve all Europe better and far cheaper than can the island fishers, or the Hollanders, Cape Blanc, or Newfoundland, who must be at as much more charge than you, may easily be conjectured by this example. An example of the gains upon every year or 6 months return. £2,000 will fit out a ship of 200, and one of 100 tons, if the dry fish they both make float that of 200, and go for Spain, sell it but at 10 shillings a quintal, but commonly it giveth 15 or 20, especially when it cometh first, which amounts to 3 or 4,000 pound, but say but 10, which is the lowest, allowing the rest for waste, it amounts at that rate to 2,000 pound, which is the whole charge of your 2 ships and their equipage. Then the return of the money and the fraught of the ship for the vintage or any other voyage is clear gain, with your ship of 100 tons of train and oil, besides the beavers and other commodities, and that you may have at home within 6 months, if God please but to send an ordinary passage; then saving half this charge by the not staying of your ships, your victuals, overplus of men and wages, with their fraught thither of things necessary for the planters, the salt being there made, as also may the nets and lines, within a short time. If nothing were to be expected but this, it might in time equalize your Hollanders' gains, if not exceed them, they returning but wood, pitch, tar, and such gross commodities, you wines, oils, fruits, silks, and such straits commodities as you please to provide by your factors, against such times as your ships arrive with them. This would so increase our shipping and sailors, and so employ and encourage a great part of our idlers and others that want employments fitting their qualities at home, were they shamed to do that they would do abroad, that could they but once taste the sweet fruits of their own labours, doubtless many thousands would be advised by good discipline to take more pleasure in honest industry than in their humours of dissolute idleness. a description of the countries in particular and their situations. But to return a little more to the particulars of this country, which I intermingle thus with my projects and reasons, not being so sufficiently yet acquainted in those parts to write fully the estate of the sea, the air, the land, the fruits, the rocks, the people, the government, religion, territories, and limitations, friends and foes, but, as I gathered from the niggardly relations in a broken language to my understanding, during the time I ranged those countries, etc. The most northern part I was at was the bay of Penobscot, which is east and west, north and south, more than 10 leagues. But such were my occasions, I was constrained to be satisfied of them I found in the bay, that the river ran far up into the land, and was well inhabited with many people, but they were from their habitations, either fishing among the isles, or hunting the lakes and woods, for deer and beavers. The bay is full of great islands, of 1, 2, 6, 8, or 10 miles in length, which divides it into many fair and excellent good harbours. On the east of it are the Tarentines, their mortal enemies, where inhabit the French, as they report that live with those people, as one nation or family. And north west of Penobscot is Mecca Dacut, at the foot of a high mountain, a kind of fortress against the Tarentines, adjoining to the high mountains of Penobscot, against whose feet doth beat the sea. But over all the land, isles, and other impediments, you may well see them 16 or 18 leagues from their situation. Sagocit is the next, then Nusconcus, Pemaquid, and Sagadahoc. Up this river, where was the western plantation, Aumuccorgan, Kinnebec, and divers others, where there is planted some cornfields. Along this river 40 or 50 miles I saw nothing but great high cliffs of barren rocks, overgrown with wood. But where the salvages dwelt, there the ground is exceeding fat and fertile. Westward of this river is the country of Auco Cisco, in the bottom of a large deep bay, full of many great isles, which divides it into many good harbours. Sowocotook is the next, in the edge of a large sandy bay, which hath many rocks and isles, but few good harbours, but for barks I yet know. But all of this coast to Penobscot, and as far I could see eastward of it, is nothing but such high craggy cliffy rocks and stony isles, that I wondered such great trees could grow upon such hard foundations. It is a country rather to affright than delight one. And how to describe a more plain spectacle of desolation, or more barren, I know not. Yet the sea there is the strangest fish pond I ever saw, and those barren isles so furnished with good woods, springs, fruits, fish, and fowl, that it makes me think, though the coast be rocky and thus affrightable, the valleys, plains, and interior parts may well, notwithstanding, be very fertile. But there is no kingdom so fertile hath not some part barren, and New England is great enough to make many kingdoms and countries were it all inhabited. As you pass the coast still westward, Aquaminticus and Passataquac are 2 convenient harbours for small barks, and a good country within their craggy cliffs. Angoam is the next. This place might content a right curious judgment, but there are many sands at the entrance of the harbour, and the worst is, it is embayed too far from the deep sea. Here are many rising hills, and on their tops and descents many cornfields and delightful groves. On the east is an isle of 2 or 3 leagues in length, the one half plain moorish grass fit for pasture, with many fair high groves of mulberry trees, gardens. And there is also oaks, pines, and other woods to make this place an excellent habitation, being a good and safe harbour. Name Keck, though it be more rocky ground, for Angoam is sandy, not much inferior, neither for the harbour nor anything I could perceive, but the multitude of people. From hence doth stretch into the sea the fair headland Trugabigzanda, fronted with 3 isles called the 3 Turks' Heads. To the north of this doth enter a great bay, where we found some habitations and cornfields. They report a great river, and at least 30 habitations, do possess this country. But because the French had got their trade, I had no leisure to discover it. The Isles of Matterhunts are on the west side of this bay, where are many isles, and questionless good harbours. And then the country of the Massachusetts, which is the paradise of all those parts, for here are many isles all planted with corn, groves, mulberries, salvage gardens, and good harbours. The coast is, for the most part, high clayey sandy cliffs. The sea coast, as you pass, shows you all along large cornfields, and great troops of well proportioned people. But the French having remained here near 6 weeks, left nothing for us to take occasion to examine the inhabitants' relations, viz., if there be near 3000 people upon these isles, and that the river doth pierce many days' journeys the entrails of that country. We found the people in those parts very kind, but in their fury no less valiant. For, upon a quarrel we had with one of them, he only with 3 others crossed the harbour of Quanahasset to certain rocks whereby we must pass, and there let fly their arrows for our shot till we were out of danger. Then come you to Accomac, an excellent good harbour, good land, and no want of anything but industrious people. After much kindness, upon a small occasion, we fought also with 40 or 50 of those, though some were hurt and some slain, yet within an hour after they became friends. Cape Cod is the next it presents itself, which is only a headland of high hills of sand, overgrown with shrubby pines, hurts, and such trash, but an excellent harbour for all weathers. This cape is made by the main sea on the one side, and a great bay on the other in form of a sickle. On it doth inhabit the people of Paumet, and in the bottom of the bay the people of Chaume. Towards the south and south-west of this cape is found a long and dangerous shoal of sands and rocks, but so far as I encircled it, I found 30 fathom water aboard the shore, and a strong current, which makes me think there is a channel about this shoal, where is the best and greatest fish to be had, winter and summer, in all that country. But, as the salvages say, there is no channel, but that the shoals begin from the main at Paumet to the Isle of Nauset, and so extends beyond their knowledge into the sea. The next to this is Capawack, and those abounding countries of copper, corn, people, and minerals, which I went to discover this last year. But because I miscarried by the way, I will leave them, to God please. I have better acquaintance with them. Section 3. A Description of New England, Part 2. Recording by Algy Pugg. Section 4. Of a Description of New England, by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 4. A Description of New England, Part 3. A good country. The Massachusetts, they report, sometimes have wars with the Beshabis of Penobscot, and are not always friends with them of Chaume and their alliance. But now they are old friends, and have each trade with other, so far as they have society, on each other's frontiers, for they make no such voyages as from Penobscot to Cape Cod, seldom to Massachusetts. In the north, as I have said, they begin to plant corn, whereof the south part hath such plenty, as they have what they will from them of the north; and in the winter much more plenty of fish and fowl: but both winter and summer hath it in one part or other all the year; being the mean and most indifferent temper betwixt heat and cold of all the regions betwixt the line and the pole: but the furs northward are much better, and in much more plenty, than southward. The landmarks. The remarkablest isles and mountains for landmarks are these: the highest isle is Sodico in the bay of Penobscot, but the three isles and the rock of Matinac are much further in the sea. Matinicus is also three plain isles and a rock betwixt it and Monaghigan. Monaghigan is a round high isle, and close by it Monanis, betwixt which is a small harbour where we ride. In Damerel's Isles is such another. Sagadahoc is known by Satquin. And 4 or 5 isles in the mouth. Smith's Isles are a heap together, none near them against Acominticus. The 3 Turks' Heads are 3 isles seen far to seaward in regard of the headland. The chief headlands are only Cape Tragabigzanda and Cape Cod. Herbs. The chief mountains, them of Penobscot, the twinkling mountain of Aucosisco, the great mountain of Sassanon, and the high mountains of Massachusetts, each of which you shall find in the map, their places, forms, and altitude. The waters are the most pure, proceeding from the entrails of rocky mountains. The herbs and fruits are of many sorts and kinds, as are kermes, currants, or a fruit like currants, mulberries, vines, respices, gooseberries, plums, walnuts, chestnuts, small nuts, etc., pumpions, gourds, strawberries, beans, peas, and maize; and a kind or two of flax, wherewith they make nets, lines, and ropes both small and great, very strong for their quantity. Woods. Oak is the chief wood, of which there is great difference in regard to the soil where it groweth. Fir, pine, walnut, chestnut, birch, ash, elm, cypress, cedar, mulberry, plum tree, hazel, saxifrage, and many other sorts. Birds. Eagles, gripes, divers sorts of hawks, cranes, geese, brants, cormorants, ducks, sheldrakes, teal, mewas, gulls, turkeys, dive droppers, and many other sorts whose names I know not. Fishes. Whales, grampus, porpoises, turbot, sturgeon, cod, hake, haddock, cole, cusk or small ling, shark, mackerel, herring, mullet, bass, pinnax, cunners, perch, eels, crabs, lobsters, mussels, wilks, oysters, and divers others, etc. Beasts. Moose, a beast bigger than a stag, deer, red and fallow, beavers, wolves, foxes, both black and other, arufcons, wildcats, bears, otters, martens, fitches, musquasus, and divers sorts of vermin, whose names I know not. All these and divers other good things do here for want of use still increase and decrease with little diminution, whereby they grow to that abundance, you shall scarce find any bay, shallow shore, or cove of sand, where you may not take many clamps or lobsters, or both at your pleasure. and in many places load your boat if you please, nor isles where you find not fruits, birds, crabs, and muscles, or all of them for taking at a low water. And in the harbours we frequented a little boy might take of cunas, and pinnocks, and such delicate fish, at the ship's stern, more than 6 or 10 can eat in a day, but with a casting net, thousands when we pleased, and scarce any place but cod, cusk, halibut, mackerel, skate, or such like. A man may take with a hook or line what he will, and in divers sandy bays a man may draw with a net great store of mullets, bases, and divers other sorts of such excellent fish, as many as his net can draw on shore. No river where there is not plenty of sturgeon, or salmon, or both, all which are to be had in abundance, observing but their seasons. But if a man will go at Christmas to gather cherries in Kent, he may be deceived, though there be plenty in summer. So here these plenties have their seasons, as I have expressed. We for the most part had little but bread and vinegar, and though the most part of July when the fishing decayed, they wrought all day, lay abroad in the isles all night, and lived on what they found, yet were not sick. But I would wish none put himself long to such plunges, except necessity constrain it. Yet worthy is that person to starve that here cannot live, if he have sense, strength, and health. For there is no such penury of these blessings in any place, but that 100 men may, in 1 hour or 2, make their provisions for a day. And he that hath experience to manage well these affairs, with 40 or 30 honest industrious men, might well undertake, if they dwelled in these parts, to subject the salvages, and feed daily 200 or 300 men, with as good corn, fish, and flesh, as the earth hath of those kinds, and yet make that labour but their pleasure, provided that they have engines that be proper for their purposes. A note for men that have great spirits and small means. Who can desire more content that hath small means, or but only his merit to advance his fortune, than to tread and plant that ground he hath purchased by the hazard of his life? If he have but the taste of virtue and magnanimity, what to such a mind can be more pleasant than planting and building a foundation for his posterity, got from the rude earth, by God's blessing and his own industry, without prejudice to any? If he have any grain of faith or zeal in religion, what can he do less hurtful to any, or more agreeable to God, than to seek to convert those poor salvages to know Christ and humanity, whose labours with discretion will triple requite thy charge and pains? What so truly suits with honour and honesty as the discovering things unknown, erecting towns, peopling countries, informing the ignorant, reforming things unjust, teaching virtue, and gain to our nature mother country a kingdom to attend her, find employment for those that are idle, because they know not what to do, so far from wronging any as to cause posterity to remember thee, and remembering thee, ever honour that remembrance with praise? Consider, what were the beginnings and endings of the monarchies of the Chaldeans, the Syrians, the Grecians, and the Romanus, but this one rule: what was it they would not do for the good of the commonwealth or their mother city? For example, Rome, what made her such a monarchess, but only the adventures of her youth, not in riots at home, but in dangers abroad? And the justice and judgment out of their experience when they grew aged? What was their ruin and hurt but this, the excess of idleness, the fondness of parents, the want of experience in magistrates, the admiration of their undeserved honours, the contempt of true merit, their unjust jealousies, their politic incredulities, their hypocritical seeming goodness, and their deeds of secret lewdness, finally, in fine, growing only formal temporists, all that their predecessors got in many years, they lost in few days. Those by their pains and virtues became lords of the world, they by their ease and vices became slaves to their servants. This is the difference betwixt the use of arms in the field and on the monuments of stones, the golden age and the leaden age, prosperity and misery, justice and corruption, substance and shadows, words and deeds, experience and imagination, making commonwealths and marring commonwealths, the fruits of virtue and the conclusions of vice. Then who would live at home idly, or think in himself any worth to live, only to eat, drink, and sleep, and so die? Or by consuming that carelessly his friends got worthily? Or by using that miserably that maintained virtue honestly? For, being descended nobly, pine with the vain vaunt of great kindred in penury? Or, to maintain a silly show of bravery, toil out thy heart, soul, and time, basely, by shifts, tricks, cards, and dice? Or by relating news of others' actions, shark here or there for a dinner or supper, deceive thy friends by fair promises and dissimulation, in borrowing where thou never intendest to pay? Offend the laws, surfeit with excess, burden thy country, abuse thyself, despair in want, and then cozen thy kindred, yea, even thine own brother, and wish thy parents death, I will not say damnation, to have their estates? Though thou seest what honours and rewards the world yet hath for them will seek them, and worthily deserve them. I would be sorry to offend, or that any should mistake my honest meaning, for I wish good to all, hurt to none. But rich men for the most part are grown to that dotage through their pride in their wealth, as though there were no accident could end it or their life. And what hellish care do such take to make it their own misery and their country's spoil, especially when there is most need of their employment, drawing by all manner of inventions from the prince and his honest subjects even the vital spirits of their powers and estates, as if their bags or brags were so powerful a defence the malicious could not assault them, when they are the only bait, to cause us not to be only assaulted, but betrayed and murdered in our own security ere we well perceive it. An example of secure covetousness. May not the miserable ruin of Constantinople, their impregnable walls, riches, and pleasures last taken by the Turk, which are but a bit in comparison of their now mightiness, remember us of the effects of private covetousness? At which time the good emperor held himself rich enough to have such rich subjects, so formal in all excess of vanity, all kind of delicacy and prodigality. His poverty when the Turks besieged, the citizens, whose merchandising thoughts were only to get wealth, little conceiving the desperate resolution of a valiant expert enemy, left the emperor so long to his conclusions, having spent all he had to pay his young, raw, discontented soldiers. And suddenly he, they, and their city were all a prey to the devouring Turk, and what they would not spare for the maintenance of them who had ventured their lives to defend them, did serve only their enemies to torment them, their friends, and country, and all Christendom to this present day. Let this lamentable example remember you that are rich, seeing there are such great thieves in the world to rob you, not grudge to lend some proportion, to breed them that have little, yet willing to learn how to defend you, for it is too late when the deed is a doing. The Romanus estate hath been worse than this. For the mere covetousness and extortion of a few of them so moved the rest, that, not having any employment but contemplation, their great judgments grew to so great malice as themselves were sufficient to destroy themselves by faction. Let this move you to embrace employment for those whose educations, spirits, and judgments want but your purses, not only to prevent such accustomed dangers, but also to gain more thereby than you have. And you fathers that are either so foolishly fond, or so miserably covetous, or so wilfully ignorant, or so negligently careless, as that you would rather maintain your children in idle wantonness, till they grow your masters, or become so basely unkind as they wish nothing but your deaths, so that both sorts grow dissolute, and although you would wish them anywhere to escape the gallows and ease your cares, though they spend you here 1, 2, or 300 pound a year, you would grudge them to give half so much in adventure with them to obtain an estate, which in a small time, but with a little assistance of your providence, might be better than your own. But if an angel should tell you that any place yet unknown can afford such fortunes, you would not believe him, no more than Columbus was believed there was any such land as is now the well known abounding America. Much less such large regions are yet unknown, as well in America as in Africa and Asia and terra incognita, where were courses for gentlemen, and them that would be so reputed, more suiting their qualities than begging from their prince's generous disposition the labours of his subjects and the very marrow of his maintenance. The author's conditions. I have not been so ill bred, but I have tasted of plenty and pleasure, as well as want and misery, nor doth necessity yet, nor occasion of discontent, force me to these endeavours, nor am I ignorant what small thank I shall have for my pains, or that many would have the world imagine them to be of great judgment, that can but blemish these my designers by their witty objections and detractions. Yet, I hope, my reasons with my deeds will so prevail with some, that I shall not want employment in these affairs, to make the most blind see his own senselessness and incredulity, hoping that gain will make them effect that which religion, charity, and the common good cannot. It were but a poor device in me to deceive myself; much more the king and state, my friends and country, with these inducements, which, seeing his majesty hath given permission, I wish all sorts of worthy, honest, industrious spirits would understand; and if they desire any further satisfaction, I will do my best to give it. Not to persuade them to go only, but go with them; not leave them there, but live with them there. I will not say, but by ill providing and undue managing, such courses may be taken, may make us miserable enough; but if I have the execution of what I have projected, if they want to eat, let them eat or never digest me. If I perform what I say, I desire but that reward out of the genus may suit my pains, quality, and condition. And if I abuse you with my tongue, take my head for satisfaction. If any dislike at the year's end, defraying their charge, by my consent they should freely return. I fear not want of company sufficient, were it but known what I know of these countries, and by the proof of that wealth I hope yearly to return, if God please to bless me from such accidents as are beyond my power in reason to prevent; for I am not so simple to think that ever any other motive than wealth will ever erect there a commonweal, or draw company from their ease and humours at home, to stay in New England to effect my purposes. The Planters, Pleasures, and Profits. unless any should think that toil might be insupportable, though these things may be had by labour and diligence, I assure myself there are who delight extremely in vain pleasure, that take much more pains in England to enjoy it, than I should do here to gain wealth sufficient, and yet I think they should not have half such sweet content, for our pleasure here is still gains, in England charges and loss. Here nature and liberty affords us that freely, which in England we want, or it costeth us dearly. What pleasure can be had, then, being tired with any occasion ashore, in planting vines, fruits, or herbs, in contriving their own grounds, to the pleasure of their own minds, their fields, gardens, orchards, buildings, ships, and other works, etc., to recreate themselves before their own doors, in their own boats upon the sea, where man, woman, and child, with a small hook and line, by angling, may take divers sorts of excellent fish at their pleasures? And is it not pretty sport to pull up twopence, sixpence, and twelvepence, as fast as you can hale and veer a line? He is a very bad fisher, cannot kill in one day with his hook and line 1, 2, or 300 cods, which, dressed and dried, if they be sold there for 10 shillings the hundred, though in England they will give more than 20, may not both the servant, the master, and merchant be well content with this gain? If a man work but 3 days in 7, he may get more than he can spend, unless he will be excessive. Now that carpenter, mason, gardener, tailor, smith, sailor, forges, or what other, may they not make this a pretty recreation, though they fish but an hour in a day, to take more than they eat in a week? Or if they will not eat it, because there is so much better choice, yet sell it or change it with the fishermen or merchants for anything they want. And what sport doth yield a more pleasing content, and less hurt and charge them, than angling with a hook, and crossing the sweet air from isle to isle, over the silent streams of a calm sea, wherein the most curious may find pleasure, profit, and content? Thus, though all men be not fishers, yet all men, whatsoever, may in other matters do as well. For necessity doth in these cases so rule a commonwealth, and each in their several functions, as their labours in their qualities may be as profitable, because there is a necessary mutual use of all. Employments for gentlemen. For gentlemen, what exercise should more delight them than ranging daily those unknown parts, using fowling and fishing for hunting and hawking? And yet you shall see the wild hawks give you some pleasure, in seeing them stoop, 6 or 7 after one another, an hour or 2 together, at the skulls of the fish in the fair harbours, as those ashore at a fowl, and never trouble nor torment yourselves with watching, mewing, feeding, and attending them, nor kill horse and man with running and crying, See you not a hawk? For hunting also, the woods, lakes, and rivers afford not only chase sufficient for any that delights in that kind of toil or pleasure, but beasts to hunt, that besides the delicacy of their bodies for food, their skins are so rich as may recompense thy daily labour with a captain's pay. Employments for labourers. For labourers, if those that sow hemp, rape, turnips, parsnips, carrots, cabbage, and such like, give 20, 30, 40, 50 shillings yearly for an acre of ground, and meat, drink, and wages to use it, and yet grow rich, when better, or at least as good ground, may be had and cost nothing but labour, it seems strange to me any such should there grow poor. My purpose is not to persuade children from their parents, men from their wives, nor servants from their masters, only such as with free consent may be spared, but that each parish or village in city or country that will but apparel their fatherless children of 13 or 14 years of age, or young married people that have small wealth to live on, here by their labour may live exceeding well, provided always that first there be sufficient power to command them, houses to receive them, means to defend them, and meet provisions for them. For any place may be overlain, and it is most necessary to have a fortress, ere this grow to practice, and sufficient masters, as carpenters, masons, fishers, fowlers, gardeners, husbandmen, sawyers, smiths, spinsters, tailors, weavers, and such like, to take 10, 12, or 20, or as there is occasion, for apprentices. The masters by this may quickly grow rich, these may learn their trades themselves to do the like, to a general and an incredible benefit for king and country, master and servant. Examples of the Spaniard. It would be a history of a large volume to recite the adventures of the Spaniards and Portugals, their affronts and defeats, their dangers and miseries, which with such incomparable honour and constant resolution, so far beyond belief, they have attempted and endured in their discoveries and plantations, as may well condemn us of too much imbecility, sloth, and negligence. Yet the authors of those new inventions were held as ridiculous for a long time, as now are others that do but seek to imitate their unparalleled virtues. And though we see daily their mountains of wealth sprung from the plants of their generous endeavours, yet is our sensuality and untowardness such, and so great, that we either ignorantly believe nothing, or so curiously contest to prevent we know not what future events, that we either so neglect or oppress or discourage the present, as we spoil all in the making, crop all in the blooming, and building upon fair sand, rather than rough rocks, judge that we know not, govern that we have not, fear that which is not, and for fear some should do too well, force such against their wills to be idle or as ill. And who is he hath judgment, courage, and any industry or quality with understanding will leave his country, his hopes at home, his certain estate, his friends, pleasures, liberty, and the preferment sweet England doth afford to all degrees, were it not to advance his fortunes by enjoying his deserts? Whose prosperity once appearing will encourage others, but it must be cherished as a child till it be able to go and understand itself, and not corrected nor oppressed above its strength ere it can know wherefore. A child can neither perform the office nor deeds of a man of strength, nor endure that affliction he is able. Nor can an apprentice at the first perform the part of a master. And if 20 years be required to make a child a man, 7 years limited an apprentice for his trade. If scarce an age be sufficient to make a wise man or a statesman, and, commonly, a man dies ere he hath learned to be discreet. If perfection be so hard to be obtained, as of necessity there must be practice as well as theoric, let no man much condemn this paradox opinion, to say, that have 7 years is scarce sufficient for a good capacity to learn in these affairs how to carry himself. And whoever shall try in these remote places the erecting of a colony, shall find at the end of 7 years occasion enough to use all his discretion, and in the interim all the content, rewards, gains, and hopes will be necessarily required to be given to the beginning, till it be able to creep, to stand and go, time enough to keep it from running. For there is no fear it will grow too fast, or ever to anything, except liberty, profit, honour, and prosperity there found, more bind the planters of those affairs in devotion to effect it, than bondage, violence, tyranny, ingratitude, and such double dealing as binds free men to become slaves, and honest men turn knaves; which hath ever been the ruin of most popular commonweals, and is very unlikely ever well to begin in anew. The bliss of Spain! Who seeth not what is the greatest good of the Spaniard but these new conclusions, in searching those unknown parts of this unknown world? By which means he dives even into the very secret of all his neighbours, and for the most part of the world. When the Portugale and Spaniard found the East and West Indies, how many did condemn themselves that did not accept of that honest offer of noble Columbus, who, upon our neglect, brought them to it, persuading ourselves the world had no such places as they had found; and yet ever since we find, they still, from time to time, have found new lands, new nations, and trades, and still daily do find both in Asia, Africa, Terra Incognita, and America; so that there is neither soldier nor mechanic, from the lord to the beggar, but those parts afford them all employment, and discharge their native soil of so many thousands of all sorts, that else by their sloth, pride, and imperfections would long ere this have troubled their neighbours or have eaten the pride of Spain itself. Now he knows little that knows not England may well spare many more people than Spain, and is as well able to furnish them with all manner of necessaries; and seeing, for all they have, they cease not still to search for that which they have not and know not, it is strange we should be so dull as not maintain that which we have, and pursue that which we know. Surely I am sure many would taste it ill, to be abridged of the titles and honours of their predecessors, when if but truly they would judge themselves, look how inferior they are to their noble virtues, so much they are unworthy of their honours and livings, which never were ordained for shows and shadows, to maintain idleness and vice, but to make them more able to abound in honour, by heroical deeds of action, judgment, piety, and virtue. What was it? They would not do both in purse and person, for the good of the commonwealth? Which might move them presently to set out their spare kindred in these generous designs. Religion, above all things, should move us, especially the clergy, if we were religious, to show our faith by our works, in converting those poor salvages to the knowledge of God, seeing what pains the Spaniard take to bring them to their adulterated faith. Honour might move the gentry, the valiant and industrious, and the hope and assurance of wealth, all, if we were that we would seem and be accounted. Or be we so inferior to other nations, or our spirits so far dejected from our ancient predecessors, or our minds so upon spoil, piracy, and such villainy, as to serve the Portugal, Spaniard, Dutch, French, or Turk, as to the cost of Europe too many do, rather than our God, our King, our country, and ourselves? Excusing our idleness and our base complaints by want of employment, when here is such choice of all sorts and for all degrees in the planting and discovering these north parts of America. Section 4. A Description of New England, Part 3. Recording by Algy Pugg. Section 5. Of a Description of New England, by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 5. A Description of New England, Part 4. My second voyage to New England. Now, to make my words more apparent by my deeds, I was, the last year 1615, to have stayed in the country, to make a more ample trial of those conclusions with 16 men, whose names were Thomas Dearmer, gentleman; Edward Stallings, gentleman; Daniel Cage, gentleman; Francis Abbott, gentleman; John Gosling, gentleman; William Ingram, soldier; Robert Meter, soldier; David Cooper, soldier; John Partridge, soldier; and 2 boys; Thomas Digby, sailor; Daniel Baker, sailor; Adam Smith, sailor; Thomas Watson, sailor; Walter Chiswick, sailor; John Hall, sailor. I confess I could have wished them as many thousands, had all the provisions been in like proportion; nor would I have had so few, could I have had means for more. Yet, would God have pleased we had safely arrived, I had never the like authority, freedom, and provision to do so well. The main assistance, next God, I had to this small number, was my acquaintance among the salvages, especially with Dobeneda, one of their greatest lords, who had lived long in England. By means of this proud salvage, I did not doubt but quickly to have got that credit with the rest of his friends and alliance, to have had as many of them as I desired in any designs I intended. And that trade also they had by such a kind of exchange of their country commodities, which both with ease and security in their seasons may be used. With him and divers others I had concluded to inhabit and defend them against the Tarentines, with a better power than the French did them, whose tyranny did enforce them to embrace my offer with no small devotion. And though many may think me more bold than wise, in regard of their power, dexterity, treachery, and inconstancy, having so desperately assaulted and betrayed many others, I say but this, because with so many I have many times done much more in Virginia than I intended here when I wanted that experience Virginia taught me, that to me it seems no danger more than ordinary. And though I know myself the meanest of many thousands, whose apprehensive inspection can pierce beyond the bounds of my abilities into the hidden things of nature, art, and reason, yet I entreat such give me leave to excuse myself of so much imbecility, as to say, that in these 8 years which I have been conversant with these affairs, I have not learned there is a great difference betwixt the directions and judgment of experimental knowledge and the superficial conjecture of variable relation, wherein rumour, humour, or misprision have such power, that oft times one is enough to beguile 20, but 20 not sufficient to keep one from being deceived. Therefore I know no reason but to believe my own eyes before any man's imagination, that is but wrested from the conceits of my own projects and endeavours. But I honour with all affection the counsel and instructions of judicial directions, or any other honest advertisement, so far to observe as they tie me not to the cruelty of unknown events. These are the inducements that drew me to neglect all other employments, and to spend my time and best abilities in these adventures; wherein, though I have had many discouragements by the ingratitude of some, the malicious slanders of others, the falseness of friends, the treachery of cowards, and slowness of adventurers, but chiefly by one hunt, who was master of the ship, with whom oft arguing these projects for a plantation, however he seemed well in words to like it, yet he practised to have robbed me of my plots and observations, and so left me alone in a desolate isle to the fury of famine and all other extremities, lest I should have acquainted Sir Thomas Smith, my honourable good friend on the council of Virginia, to the end he and his associates might secretly engross it ere it were known to the state. Yet that God that hath always kept me from the worst of such practices delivered me from the worst of his dissimulations. Notwithstanding, after my departure, he abused the salvages where he came, and betrayed 27 of these poor innocent souls, which he sold in Spain for slaves, to move their hate against our nation, as well as to cause my proceedings to be so much the more difficult. Now, returning in the bark, in the 5th of August, I arrived at Plymouth, where imparting those my purposes to my honourable friend Sir Ferdinando Gorge, and some others, I was so encouraged and assured to have them managing their authority in those parts during my life, that I engaged myself to undertake it for them. Arriving at London, I found also many promise me such assistance, that I entertained Michael Cooper the master, who returned with me, and others of the company. How he dealt with others, or others with him, I know not; but my public proceeding gave such encouragement that it became so well apprehended by some few of the Southron company, as these projects were liked, and he furnished from London with 4 ships at sea, before they at Plymouth had made any provision at all, but only a ship chiefly set out by Sir Ferdinando Gorge, which upon Hunt's late treachery among the salvages returned as she went, and did little or nothing but lost her time. I must confess I was beholden to the setters forth of the 4 ships that went with Cooper, and that they offered me that employment if I would accept it, and I find my refusal hath incurred some of their displeasures, whose favour and love I exceedingly desire, if I may honestly enjoy it. And though they do censure me as opposite to their proceedings, they shall yet still in all my words and deeds find it is their error, not my fault, that occasions their dislike. For having engaged myself in this business to the west country, I had been very dishonest to have broke my promise, nor will I spend more time in discovery or fishing till I may go with a company for plantation, for I know my grounds. Yet every one that reads this book cannot put it in practice, though it may help any that have seen those parts. And though they endeavour to work me even out of my own designs, I will not much envy their fortunes. But I would be sorry their intruding ignorance should, by their defilements, bring those certainties to doubtfulness. So that the business prosper, I have my desire, be it by Londoner, Scot, Welsh, or English, that are true subjects to our king and country. The good of my country is that I seek, and there is more than enough for all, if they could be content but to proceed. The occasion of my return. At last it pleased Sir Ferdinando Gorge and Master Dr. Sutcliffe, Dean of Exeter, to conceive so well of these projects and my former employments, as induced them to make a new adventure with me in those parts, whither they have so often sent to their continual loss; by whose example many inhabitants of the west country made promises of much more than was looked for, but their private emulations quickly qualified that heat in the greater number, so that the burden lay principally on them and some few gentlemen, my friends in London. In the end I was furnished with a ship of 200 and another of 50. My re-embarkment, encounters with pirates, and imprisonment by the French. But ere I had sailed 120 leagues, she broke all her masts, pumping each watch 5 or 6,000 strokes. Only her sprit sail remained to spoon before the wind, till we had re-accommodated a jury mast and the rest, to return for Plymouth. My vice admiral being lost, not knowing of this, proceeded her voyage. Now with the remainder of those provisions I got out again in a small bark of 60 tons, with 30 men, for this of 200, and provision for 70, which were the 16 before named, and 14 other sailors for the ship. With those I set sail again the 24th of June, where what befell me, because my actions and writings are so public to the world, envy still seeking to scandalize my endeavours, and seeing no power but death can stop the chat of ill tongues, nor imagination of men's minds, lest my own relations of those hard events might by some constructors be made doubtful, I have thought it best to insert the examinations of those proceedings taken by Sir Lewis Stukely, a worthy knight and vice admiral of Devonshire, which were as followeth: The examination of Daniel Baker, late steward to Captain John Smith in the return of Plymouth, taken before Sir Lewis Stukely, Knight, the 8th of December, 1615. Captain Fry, his ship, 140 tons, 36 cast pieces, and murderers, 80 men, of which 40 or 50 were master gunners. Who saith, being chased 2 days by one Fry, an English pirate, that could not board us, by reason of foul weather, Edmund Chambers, the master John Minter, his mate Thomas Digby the pilot, and others importuned his said captain to yield, holding it impossible he should defend himself, and that the said captain should send them his boat, in that they had none; which at last he concluded upon these conditions, that Fry the pirate should vow not to take any thing from Captain Smith that might overthrow his voyage, nor send more pirates into his ship than he liked of; otherwise he would make sure of them he had, and defend himself against the rest as he could. More, he confesseth that the quartermasters and chambers received gold of those pirates, but how much he knoweth not, nor would his captain come out of his cabin to entertain them, although a great many of them had been his sailors, and for his love would have wafted us to the Isles of Flowers. The one of 200, the other 20. At Foyle we were chased by 2 French pirates, who commanded us amain. Chambers, Minter, Digby, and others importuned again the captain to yield, alleging they were Turks, and would make them all slaves, or Frenchmen, and would throw them all overboard, if they shot but a piece; and that they were entertained to fish, and not to fight; until the captain vowed to fire the powder and split the ship if they would not stand to their defence, whereby at last we went clear of them, for all they shot. The admiral, 140 tons, 12 pieces, 12 murderers, 90 men, with long pistols, pocket pistols, musket, sword, and poignard. The vice admiral, 100 tons, the rear admiral, 60, the others 80. All had 250 men most armed, as is said. At Flowers we were chased by 4 French men of war, all with their close fights afore and after. After this examinance, captain having provided for our defence, Chambers, Minter, Digby, and some others, again importuned him to yield to the favour of those against whom there was nothing but ruin by fighting. But if he would go aboard them, in that he would speak French, by courtesy he might go clear, seeing they offered him such fair quarter, and vowed they were Protestants and all of Rochelle, and had the king's commission only to take Spaniards, Portugales, and pirates; which at last he did, but they kept this examinate's captain and some other of his company with him. The next day the French men of war went aboard us, and took what they listed, and divided the company into their several ships, and manned this examinate's ship with the Frenchmen, and chased with her all the ships they saw, until, about 5 or 6 days after, upon better consideration, they surrendered the ship and victuals, with the most part of our provision, but not our weapons. The gentlemen and soldiers were ever willing to fight. More, he confesseth that his captain exhorted them to perform their voyage, or go for Newfoundland, to return fraughted with fish, where he would find means to proceed in his plantation; but Chambers and Minter grew upon terms they would not, until those that were soldiers concluded with their captain's resolution they would, seeing they had clothes, victuals, salt, nets, and line sufficient, and expected their arms, and such other things as they wanted, the French promised to restore, which the captain the next day went to seek, and sent them a bout loading of commodities, as powder, match, hooks, instruments, his sword and dagger, bedding, aquavitae, his commission, apparel, and many other things, the particulars he remembereth not. But as for the cloth, canoes, and the captain's clothes, Chambers and his associates divided it amongst themselves, and to whom they best liked, his captain not having anything, to his knowledge, but his waistcoat and breeches; and in this manner going from ship to ship, to regain our arms and the rest, they, seeing us sail, gave chase until night. The next day being very foul weather, this examinate came so near with the ship unto the French men of war, that they split the main sail on the other spretch sail yard. Chambers willed the captain come aboard, or he would leave him, whereupon the captain commanded Chambers to send his boat for him. Chambers replied she was split, which was false, telling him he might come, if he would, in the admiral's boat. The captain's answer was, he could not command her, nor come when he would, so this examinate fell upon Sterne, and that night left his said captain alone amongst the Frenchmen, in this manner, by the command of Chambers, Minter, and others. Daniel Cage, Edward Stallings, gentlemen; Walter Chiswick, David Cooper, Robert Miller, and John Partridge, being examined, do acknowledge and confess that Daniel Baker, his examination above written, is true. A double treachery. Now the cause why the French detained me again was the suspicion this Chambers and Minter gave them, that I would revenge myself upon the Bank or in Newfoundland of all the French I could there encounter, and how I would have fired the ship had they not overpersuaded me, and many other such like tricks to catch but opportunity in this manner of leave me. And thus they returned to Plymouth, and perforce with the French I thus proceeded. A fleet of 9 French men of war, and fights with the Spaniards. Being a fleet of 8 or 9 sail, we watched for the West Indies fleet, till ill weather separated us from the other 8. Still we spent our time about the isles near File, where, to keep my perplexed thoughts from too much meditation of my miserable estate, I writ this discourse, thinking to have it sent you of his Majesty's counsel by some ship or other, for I saw their purpose was to take all they could. At last we were chased by one Captain Barra, an English pirate, in a small ship, with some 12 pieces of ordnance, about 30 men, and near all starved. They sought by courtesy relief of us, who gave them such fair promises, as at last we betrayed Captain Wollaston, his lieutenant, and 4 or 5 of their men aboard us, and then provided to take the rest perforce. Now my part was to be prisoner in the gun room, and not to speak to any of them upon my life. Yet had Barra knowledge what I was. Then Barra, perceiving well these French intents, made ready to fight, and Wollaston as resolutely regarded not their threats, which gave us to moor upon the Matalonga some 16 hours, and then returned their prisoners, and some victuals also, upon a small composition. The next we took was a small English man of Poole from Newfoundland. The great cabin at this present was my prison, from whence I could see them pillage those poor men of all that they had, and half their fish. When he was gone, they sold his poor clothes at the mainmast by an outcry, which scarce gave each man 7 pence apiece. Not long after, we took a Scot fraught from St. Michael's to Bristol. He had better fortune than the other; for, having but taken a boat loading of sugar, marmalade, suckets, and such like, we descried 4 sail, after whom we stood, who furling their mainsails attended us to fight. But our French spirits were content only to perceive they were English Red Crosses. Within a very small time after, we chased 4 Spanish ships came from the Indies. We fought with them 4 or 5 hours, tore their sails and sides, yet not daring to board them, lost them. A prize worth 16,000 crowns. A poor carule of Brasile was the next we chased, and, after a small fight, 13 or 14 of her men being wounded, which was the better half, we took her, with 370 chests of sugar. A prize worth 200,000 crowns. The next was a West Indiesman of 160 tons, with 1200 hides, 50 chests of cochineal, 14 coffers of wedges of silver, 8,000 rials of 8, and 6 coffers of the King of Spain's treasure, besides the pillage and rich coffers of many rich passengers. 2 months they kept me in this manner to manage their fights against the Spaniards, and be a prisoner when they took any English. Now, though the captain had oft broke his promise, which was to put me ashore on the Isles, or the next ship be took, yet at last he was entreated I should go for France in the carroel of sugar, himself resolved still to keep the seas. Within 2 days after, we were hailed by 2 West Indiamen, but when they saw us wave them for the King of France, they gave us their broadsides, shot through our mainmast, and so left us. Having lived thus near 3 months amongst those French men of war, with much ado we arrived at the Goulion, not far from Rochelle, where instead of the great promises they always fed me with, of double satisfaction and full content, they kept me 5 or 6 days prisoner in the carroel, accusing me to be him that burnt their colony in New France, to force me give them a discharge before the judge of the Admiralty, and so stand to their courtesy for satisfaction, or lie in prison, or a worse mischief. My escape from the Frenchmen. To prevent this choice, in the end of such a storm, that beat them all under hatches, I watched my opportunity to get ashore in their boat, whereinto in the dark night I secretly got, and with a half pike that lay by me put adrift for the Rat Isle. But the current was so strong and the sea so great, I went adrift to sea, till it pleased God the wind so turned with the tide, that although I was all this fearful night of gusts and rain in the sea, the space of 12 hours, when many ships were driven ashore, and divers split, and being with sculling and bailing the water tired, I expected each minute would sink me. At last I arrived in an oozy isle by Sharone, where certain fowlers found me near drowned and half dead, with water, cold, and hunger. By those I found means to get to Rochelle, where I understood the man of war which we left at sea, and the rich prize was split, the captain drowned, and half his company the same night, within 7 leagues of that place, from whence I escaped alone in the little boat by the mercy of God, far beyond all men's reason or my expectation. Arriving at Rochelle, upon my complaint to the Judge of the Admiralty, I found many good words and fair promises, and ere long many of them that escaped drowning told me the news they heard of my own death. These I arresting, their several examinations did so confirm my complaint, it was held proof sufficient. Sir Thomas Edmonds. All which being performed according to the order of justice, from under the Judge's hand, I presented it to the English ambassador then at Bordeaux, where it was my chance to see the arrival of the King's great marriage brought from Spain. Of the wrack of the rich prize some 36,000 crowns worth of goods came ashore, and was saved with the carol, which I did my best to arrest. The Judge did promise me I should have justice. What will be the conclusion as yet, I know not. They betrayed me, having the broad seal of England, and near 20 sail of English more, besides them concealed, in like manner were betrayed that year. But under the colour to take pirates and West Indiamen, because the Spaniards will not suffer the French trade in the West Indies any goods from thence, though they take them upon the coast of Spain a lawful prize, or from any of his territories out of the limits of Europe. My return for England, 1615. Leaving thus my business in France, I returned to Plymouth, to find them that had thus buried me amongst the French, and not only buried me, but with so much infamy as such treacherous cowards could suggest to excuse their villainies, but my clothes, books, instruments, arms, and what I had, they shared amongst them, and what they liked, feigning the French had all was wanting, and had thrown them into the sea, taken their ship, and all, had they not run away and left me, as they did. The chieftains of this mutiny that I could find I laid by the heels. The rest, like themselves, confessed the truth, as you have heard. Now how I have or could prevent these accidents, I rest at your censures. But to the matter. Newfoundland at the first, I have heard, was held as desperate a fishing as this I project in New England, Placentia, and the Bank, were also as doubtful to the French. But, for all the disasters happened me, the business is the same it was, and the 5 ships, whereof one was reported more than 300 tons, went forward, and found fish so much, that neither Iceland man nor Newfoundland man I could hear of hath been there, will go any more to either place, if they may go thither. The success of my Vice Admiral and the 4 ships of London from New England. So that upon the return of my Vice Admiral, that proceeded on her voyage when I spent my masts, from Plymouth this year are gone 4 or 5 sail, and from London as many, only to make voyages of profit, where the Englishmen have yet been, all their returns together, except Sir Francis Pophamus, would scarce make one a savour of near a dozen I could nominate, though there be fish sufficient, as I persuade myself, to float yearly 400 or 500 sail, or as many as will go. For this fishing stretcheth along the coast from Cape Cod to Newfoundland, which is 700 or 800 miles at the least, and hath his course in the deeps, and by the shore, all the year long, keeping their haunts and feedings as the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. But all men are not such as they should be, that have undertaken those voyages, and a man that hath but heard of an instrument can hardly use it so well as he that by use hath contrived to make it. All the Romanuses were not Scipios, nor all the Genoeses Columbuses, nor all Spaniards could tease us, had they dived no deeper in the secrets of their discoveries than we, or stopped at such doubts and poor accidental chances, they had never been remembered as they are, yet had they no such certainties to begin as we. But, to conclude, Adam and Eve did first begin this innocent work, to plant the earth to remain to posterity, but not without labour, trouble, and industry. Noah and his family began again the second plantation, and their seed, as it still increaseth, hath still planted new countries, and one country another, and so the world to that estate it is, but not without much hazard, trouble, discontents, and many disasters. Had those worthy fathers and their memorable offspring not been more diligent for us now in these ages than we are to plant that yet unplanted for the after livers; had the seed of Abraham, our Saviour Christ, and his apostles had exposed themselves to no more dangers to teach the gospel and the will of God than we, even we ourselves had at this present been as savage and as miserable as the most barbarous savage yet uncivilized. The Hebrews and Lacedaemonians, the Goths, the Grecians, the Romanus, and the rest, what was it they would not undertake to enlarge their territories, enrich their subjects, resist their enemies? Those that were the founders of those great monarchies and their virtues were no silvered idle golden Pharisees, but industrious iron steeled publicans. They regarded more provisions and necessaries for their people than jewels, riches, ease, or delight for themselves. Riches were their servants, not their masters. They ruled as fathers, not as tyrants, their people as children, not as slaves. There was no disaster could discourage them, and let none think they encountered not with all manner of encumbrances. And what have ever been the works of the greatest princes of the earth, but planting of countries and civilizing barbarous and inhumane nations to civility and humanity, whose eternal actions fill our histories? Lastly, the Portugales and Spaniards, whose ever living actions before our eyes will testify with them our idleness and ingratitude to all posterities, and the neglect of our duties in our piety and religion we owe our God, our King, and country, and of want charity to those poor salvages whose country we challenge, use, and possess, except we be but made to use and mar what our forefathers made, or but only tell what they did, or esteem ourselves too good to take the like pains. Was it virtue in them to provide that doth maintain us, and baseness for us to do the like for others? Surely no. Then, seeing we are not born for ourselves, but each to help other, and our abilities are much alike at the hour of our birth, and the minute of our death, seeing our good deeds, or our bad, by faith in Christ's merits, is all we have to carry our souls to heaven or hell; seeing honour is our lives' ambition, and our ambition after death to have an honourable memory of our life; and seeing by no means we could be abated of the dignities and glories of our predecessors, let us imitate their virtues to be worthily their successors. Finis. At London, printed the 18th of June, in the year of our Lord 1616. End of Section 5. A Description of New England, Part 4. Recording by Algie Pug. A Description of New England, by Captain John Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 6. Testimonial Verses, Closing Set. To his worthy Captain, the Author. Oft thou hast led, when I brought up the rear in bloody wars, where thousands have been slain. Then give me leave in this some part to bear, and, as thy servant, here to read my name. 'Tis true, long time thou hast my captain been in the fierce wars of Transylvania, long ere that thou America hadst seen, or led wast captive in Virginia. Thou that to pass the world's four parts dost deem no more than 'twere to go to bed or drink, and all that thou yet hast done thou dost esteem as nothing. This does cause me think that thou I've seen so oft approved in dangers, and thrice captive thy valour still hath freed, art yet preserved to convert those strangers. By God thy guide, I trust it is decreed. For me I not commend, but much admire thy England yet unknown to passers by her, for it will praise itself in spite of me, thou it thou, to all posterity. Your true friend and soldier, Edward Robinson. To my honest Captain the Author. Malignant times! What can be said or done, but shall be censured and traduced by some? This worthy work, which thou hast bought so dear, ne thou nor it detractors need to fear. Thy words by deeds so long thou hast approved, of thousands know thee not thou art beloved. And this great plot will make thee 10 times more known and beloved than e'er thou wert before. I never knew a warrior yet but thee, from wine, tobacco, debts, dice, oaths so free. I call thee warrior, and I make the bolder, for many a captain now was ne'er soldier. Some such may swell at this, but, to their praise, when they have done like thee, my muse shall raise their due deserts to worthies yet to come, to live like thine admired, till day of doom. Your true friend, sometimes your soldier, Thomas Carleton. End of Section 6. Testimonial Verses, closing set. End of a description of New England, by Captain John Smith. Recording by Algie Pugg.